All right, this is Marty Wilson. I'm sitting in Dean Peter Hawk's office with Peter Hawks, and we have on the phone Ian Ackroyd-Kelly, better known around here as AK. It's September 20th, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and we're here to talk to...
2017.
2017.
Yeah.
2017, yes. Yeah, what year? And we're here to talk to AK about his experience at East Stroudsburg University. But before we get started, AK, I have to ask you if you will gift this interview to the university.
Yes, I shall.
Okay, so let's get started. When did you, or what were your fondest memories of your time at ESU?
Let's see. Well, most of them had to do with the classroom and just events that took place in the classroom, that were interesting type of things. One of them was particularly, I remember very fondly, a class that I had in field techniques and geography, and just the whole way that the classroom went and everything like that, and the response that I got from the students indicated that they actually were getting the subject and knew what to do with it.
Great. So your teaching experience is what stood out for you. We should point out at this point, you taught in the geography department. What courses did you teach?
Every one except two.
Right.
I taught every course that the geography department offered except for climatology and vegetation and soils. But at one time or another, because of exigencies that existed and things like that, I taught primarily the cultural side of the geography spectrum. Cultural geography, historical geography, political geography, and the regional courses, things like the non-existent anymore Soviet Union, Southeast Asia, Europe, all the other ones like that. And then for a while, because we had a shortage of personnel, I taught a number of the physical sides. So I taught like physical geography, physical geology, geomorphology, things like that. But again, just I didn't know much about meteorology, climatology, and vegetation and soil. So those I did not teach.
For the record, when did you begin teaching here, and when did you stop teaching?
I started in the fall of 1974. And my last class that I taught there as a class was in the summer of 2008.
But that didn't end your career at ESU, did it?
Tragically, no. No, I was offered to come back, or Peter sent me back, or offered me to come back twice as Associate Dean.
And how long did you do that?
Well, 2 years. First one time was between 2009 and 2010. And the second time was between 2011 and 2012.
Okay. All right. Well, some of these questions we designed for people that attended ESU, but I think we can adapt them to this situation. Can you describe some kind of defining moment or something that, either good or bad, that helped to shape your career at ESU?
I think the defining thing was occurred in the summer, let's see, well, it had been in the spring of 1978. And at that time I was a junior faculty member, and the name will probably ring a bell with some people. Dick Luce came to me and asked me if I would take over what was then called the June-January program. And that kind of got me involved into the administrative aspects as well as the teaching aspects of the university. And then about 2 years later, Mildred Wheatley, another name out of the past, retired, and I took over the Admissions Appeals Committee, and I did that for the next 30-odd years or so. So those things kind of set me up on a path that was not only involved in the classroom, but involved in the university as a whole.
So you were kind of on both sides of the instructor versus administration divide.
If you want to call it that, yeah. Yes, I was to some degree. Not to the degree that some others were. For instance, I think of someone like Joe Kavanaugh. who basically was very involved in both of them. That would, not to that degree, but certainly yes.
Okay, well, since you mentioned Joe Kavanaugh, you might talk about him more, or maybe somebody else, but can you talk about people that you found particularly inspiring?
In certain ways, I would say, let's just see how I would do this, Marty. I'd say there were three different areas which people acted as kind of inspirations for me to some degree. One of them was in the classroom. And I think the people that there probably inspired me most were the people that I considered to be, and remember this is going back to a time in the 1970s when lecture was the way that things were done, the great lecturers on the campus. And for that I would say somebody like Joe Castelli, John Muncie, Jim Henwood, Don McDonald in the political science department. They were all really brilliant lecturers, and somebody whose class I would have loved to have sat in and listened to. So that would be the teaching side. From the from the administrative side, I knew some people way back. I even knew Frank Sills and people like that, although through a different kind of context. I think from the administrative side, probably, as you just said, Joe Kavanaugh. He impressed me very much with his knowledge of the system, knowledge of the university, just knowing things about things. And then on the other side, with the students and the interaction with students, I think someone like Mildred Wheatley, to an extent Bob Moses, Nancy Weber, people like that who were very involved with the university from the student side of things. So I think all of those three areas impressed me.
Okay, good.
Go ahead.
Were in your many years at ESU, were there doors that were open to you? Did you, in your experience at ESU, did you come upon something that opened a new path to you in life or in your career?
The only thing, and it really was, as I said before, almost out of desperation. My background in geography, all the way through, had been in the cultural side of the field with things like the political, all that other stuff. And what happened was, because of the existence, the problems that we had with personnel, opening up the physical side of the field to me. And for a while there, I think I was probably, to follow the old idea, probably about 2 chapters ahead of the students in the book. Mm-hmm. But that was an interesting area, opened up a new area to me to explore and to get interested in.
Okay. Do you remember, what do you think the most significant event during your time at ESU took place at ESU? What was the most significant event?
Well, the thing I remember most, I mean, of all of that, and it's not directly connected with ESU, of course, at all, was September 11th, the 9/11, because I was in the classroom at the time, and our secretary at the time, Diana Cardwell, came into the back of the room, and it's very unusual for her to do something like that. In fact, she'd never done it before. And she kind of motioned to me, and she came back and told me that planes had collided into the World Trade Center. I remember most of it, almost anything.
This was part way through your class? Was this an 8 o'clock class or a 9 o'clock class?
This was a 9 o'clock class.
Okay. And it was part way through? Did you...
Yeah, it was part way through the class.
Did you end the class, or what did you do?
No, I just kept going, because actually what I recalled back, Marty, was to... the incident that, not that I recall the incident, because I'm not that old, but the incident that had taken place back in, I think it was 1946 or 47, when a B-24 Liberator flew into the Empire State Building in New York. So I kind of figured, well, okay, a plane got off course and crashed into the building. I didn't realize the enormity of the effect that it would actually have.
But what happened when you ended class that day and went back to your office?
I went back to the office and... got ready for my next class, which was, I think, an hour later, and then they came on and kind of announced that the school was closing. And because of this event that had taken place, that this was, in fact, because by that time, of course, the second plane had gone into the South Tower, I guess it was.
Yeah, and then the building started coming down.
Yeah, then the building started coming down.
Yeah, I remember watching that upstairs on the 4th floor of Stroud with my colleagues on the televisions that used to be in the classrooms.
Yeah, I didn't see the television, but I just was hearing it kind of, and then of course they announced that it was they were closing down the university.
Huh. All right. Well, moving down these questions, and Peter, anytime you want to jump in, help yourself. But now I know you were active in the community at ESU in a lot of ways. Can you just maybe run through those? You've already mentioned some.
Joe Kavanaugh and I one time said to each other, we have a new rule for who should be appointed or who should get promoted if you wanted to do service for the community or for the university. If you had been on a committee with either one of us, you probably had been on most committees. Because I think we ended up on more committees than I can imagine. The principal one that I was on was the Admissions Appeals Committee, of course, which I think now is quasi-defunct for the university. Yeah. But I was on Middle States committees. I chaired one of the subunits, the academic subunit, twice on that. I was also on a committee for retention. I was on a committee that I have no idea why I was on it, for picking new computers for the college, because I knew exactly zero about computers. I was on a whole pile of other committees. Yeah. Peter got me on a couple there with him. One of them was to set up the new, was it Peter, academic schedule or something?
Course availability committee.
I'm not sure what the exact title of it was. Things like that. Yeah. But I was on so many search and screens I can't even remember, all the way from presidential to vice presidential down to departmental. So there was lots of them.
So, as a fellow faculty member, that's an amazing amount of service to the university. But what is it about somebody like you? Maybe you can't answer this, but why did you and people like Kavanaugh, why were you so involved in these things?
I think in my own case, and I can't, of course, speak for the late Joe Kavanaugh, but I can speak for myself. When I see things that needed to be done, I felt that I needed to help do them. I think that probably comes out of my background in the military, and even before that, in college, and then certainly in the military, and then later on with my work with other groups like the CIA and that. I just can't let things sit if I see something that needs to be done.
You were involved with the CIA?
Yeah, I worked for the CIA I actually had a leave of absence from the university in 1979 and 1980. They asked me to come and edit an atlas of China for them that they were putting out.
China was an area of your expertise?
It was, yeah. I had worked for them as an intern when I was in graduate school for 2 summers, and then that was back in the earlier 70s, and then they asked me to come back to do that atlas of China for them.
Well, the next question I don't know how you can possibly answer because you were so busy at the university, but were you involved in the community at large, or how were you involved in the community at large?
To an extent, not extensively. Really, most of my interests were at the university. I was involved, as you know, with the Historical Association and things like that. And then beyond the campus walls, for instance, things like the Pennsylvania Geographic Society and the Delaware Valley Geographic Association. I was president of both of those at various times and stuff. So there was that. Not so much in the community itself.
What about the winter ice harvesting?
Oh, yeah, ice harvesting, always a joy. If you want to freeze your butt off and you go out there. I was the associate teamster. I got to pick out the horse's hooves and put the brakes on the ice wagon when it was going down the hill. Always important jobs.
Well, can you comment briefly on how you enjoyed or did not enjoy your time at ESU? Do you look back fondly on your time at ESU?
I enjoyed parts of it, and and other parts of it I didn't. I didn't enjoy things like certain administrative decisions that were made, certainly that affected my department and eventually caused the department to basically have to reabsorb into the history department from there. There were things like that and certain other activities like that. Enjoyment I got out of the classes at a time. As it went farther and farther along, I realized that my set of experiences and my ideas about things were becoming increasingly distant from those of the students. And and plus the fact that the other thing I had trouble with was technology. I had not yet moved too far toward the mouth of the cave. I still am back in there where the fire is in the back of the cave, technologically. So that was a difficult thing for me to deal with as well. But the individual experiences in the classroom, like the one that I mentioned earlier, other ones, some of them were just totally goofy things. I had a class at one time that was a small class, I think maybe like 12 or 13 people, who decided that it would be fun each day to come to class and sit in a different configuration. So like one day they came and sat all around the edges. The next day they came and formed an X in the middle of the class. The next day they came and formed rows in front, the back, and every other row, and so on. So it was things like that that were fun and made teaching fun to do it.
Wow. So, we're at the end of my list of questions. Do you have anything that you wanted to ask, Peter, that you can think of?
No.
Our last question is always, AK, what should we have asked you? I mean, is there something that...
Gosh, I don't know.
Is there a question that maybe you were hoping I'd ask and you have an answer for and I haven't asked
No,
you?
I really hadn't given it a whole lot of thought other than Peter's warning beforehand. No, sorry, Peter, I didn't mean to use the word warning, but that's all right. I can't think of anything, Marty.
All right, great. Well, if we have nothing else, we'll call it a day.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, AK, for doing this.
Sure.
Really appreciate it.
I'll go back to the horses now.
Okay, can you stay on the line while we finish the recording?
Sure.
So you want me to turn this off?
Yeah.
Okay.